So our hamstrings are gonna be responsible for things like hip extension, okay? So think about if I'm running and I extend here, or even if I'm finishing a clean or I'm going through a vertical jump here, this hip extension is going to be related to our hamstrings. Now, another key component around hamstring functionality is going to be knee flexion. Okay, so knee flexion is another area where we see a key aspect around the functionality of our hamstrings. So with that being said, if we can understand that hamstring flexibility is a key component around hamstring health, okay, or hamstring mobility is a key component around hamstring health. Then if we understand the mechanisms of knee flexion and hip extension, now we can start to understand different exercises that we can use. So some traditional movements would be using like a back extension, okay? So I have my knees almost in completely lockout position here, but this would be hip flexion come into hip extension. And when I get to the top, I'm gonna feel that in my hamstrings, right? Boom. And one thing that we can then do to improve that hip extension might be add some load. So we'll go here, boom, boom. And so that's a type of accessory movement to train hip extension if we see in an athlete that that's a little weak or they have a little bit of a problem area. Some athletes tend to have like a hamstring pull right around their glute where the glute links in with the hammy. So that's one thing, and this is a common accessory. Back extension is a common accessory, just like a glute ham, that everybody tends to see. It's not that secret hamstring exercise. I'm Olympic strength coach Dane Miller, and recently I've started to use Factor. And this fall, I'm sure that you guys are packed with a whole bunch of things that you're doing outside of the kitchen. And that's why now is a perfect time for you to turn to Factor, where they're gonna deliver you nutritious and super healthy meals that you can use in just 2 minutes. Whether you're managing calories or maximizing your protein intake, I think some of the best parts about Factor, and something that I've found, is that when I'm on the go, when I'm working all day, it's easy for me to trust and rely on Factor. They have 6 different types of meals that you can choose from that go from breakfast to lunch to dinner, and they even have energy shots that you can use. It's extremely healthy, and one thing that I continuously find to be a problem for myself when I am managing my calories and I am trying to manage my time is that if I go for a long run or if I get a big lift in, oftentimes I'm trying to run to a meeting or I'm trying to go pick up my kids. Fortunately, I can just put Factor right into the microwave, get it ready, and I can eat it on the go and know that it's going to be extremely healthy. In my mind, Factor helps me stay flexible with my nutrition and my time. Head over to factor75.com or click the link down below and use code GarageStrength50 at checkout. You're gonna get 50% off your first box and another 20% off next month's orders. So again, head over to factor75.com or use the link down below. Check out with GarageStrength50. Peace. Another thing that we can see is that if we get set here, this would be a Nordic bench, right? So something that we use in knee flexion. Now, one cool thing that we've shown in past videos is just coming down here, we have knee flexion, and then we have hip flexion, and we get into hip extension in a bent knee position. So this has been shown, we've shown you guys this a bunch of times. It's just an easy action here. You try and squeeze your glutes, squeeze here for that hip extension. Okay, so that's another hamstring movement. Then we can progress from here, and a lot of you guys have even commented that you want us to do a video on progressing into that Nordic curl, which I'm about to show you, so we might even do that. If you want that, comment down below. If we go from this, okay, into like a razor curl. So a razor curl, I'm gonna extend my knee and my hip and then come back into hip flexion. Like this, okay? Here, okay? And we could do that on a glute ham. We could do that on that Nordic bench. Another amazing exercise, we've shown you that one. It's not the secret one. Now, the last one here that is very, very common would be a Nordic. Okay, you can do a Nordic with a band. You can do it cheating a little bit. It's not cheating, but in the bad sense. But in an assistant position here, we come down, we and come back up. Okay, down, come back up. Now, these 4 hamstring movements are really, really key behind developing hamstring strength. And this movement here, especially on the back extension, can help with hamstring flexibility. The paper that we are going to talk about a little bit, where they took 34 different athletes, they went through and they tested them using Nordics with this secret exercise. They actually looked at improving hamstring flexibility, and not only improving hamstring flexibility, but improving hamstring flexibility when there's a very long position of the hamstring in a position that's common for hamstring pulls. So that's another big aspect here, is that oftentimes hamstring pulls tend to occur when an athlete is sprinting. So if an athlete is actually running at a higher speed and their foot placement is in front of their center of mass and their chest tends to be forward. That's when most hamstring injuries occur. So one, we have to improve athletes' sprint technique, but two, we have to enhance their flexibility in their hamstring in that position. And then three, we have to strengthen them in that position, because we don't know. In sports, they might get into that position just based off of a scenario in the field of play. So that's where this next movement comes into play. And the paper actually found that this specific exercise indeed did improve that hamstring flexibility, and it was through that long eccentric in a very lengthened position. So we're gonna show you that shortly, and then we're gonna give you guys a nice little program that you can use to implement that into your training so you can prevent that hamstring injury. Okay, so when we're trying to develop this exercise inside of a program, we've got to think through how we build out training inside of our strength training at Peak Strength. We will design a program where we have a technical coordination movement or a high speed movement with load. Okay, so think about doing a snatch here or a clean. Okay, this is where a lot of hip extension occurs through that finish. Then we'll do something like a strength movement. So think like a single leg squat. So we'll do a single leg squat with some type of pairing, some type of superset. That's that next aspect when we have that leg power day inside of Peak Strength. And then we'll finish with some specific accessory movements built around preventing issues from arising. Okay, so in specific sports, I like to think about tendencies. So if we have a baseball player, the tendency is they're gonna have elbow issues likely, they're gonna have shoulder issues, maybe even lower back issues. So we need our accessories to be built around that. And that's the same thing that we do inside of our sprint program, inside of every program in Peak Strength, is that we think through the tendencies and the issues that those specific sports have. So if you need help with your programming, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You download Peak Strength today, get in there and get that done. Now, this exercise is going to be something that we would pair with the Nordics, okay? So in the paper, they found that by lengthening an athlete in a really long position with their hamstring, by doing this exercise, they can see an improvement in their hamstring flexibility. So if our back leg is around 20 degrees on the bend, okay, and almost all of our load is through that forefoot, that heel, okay, right there. We would come back here, okay, and I wanna try and think about pulling and extending my chest up while you're holding onto a barbell. This is called a hamstring glider, okay? So this movement isn't like the absolute thing that you have to do, otherwise you're gonna have hamstring injuries all the time. But if you're pairing an exercise like this with Nordics or with the hip flexion into the extension, or even with a razor curl, and then you're doing those consistent jumps, you're doing those consistent high speed movements as well, this movement based off of this paper is going to improve that hamstring flexibility. And remember, I talked about injuries occur, most hamstring pulls occur if I'm running at full speed and I plant here, it's in front of my center of mass too much, I'm flexed here, okay? This is where we tend to see a hamstring pull. Oftentimes sprinters will feel that within the first like 15 to 30 meters because they have too much forward lean, foot placement is not under their center of mass during the drive phase, and then that leads to a strain. This is a specific exercise that can help cure that issue, especially if we're working on their technique. So again, I'm gonna show this here, okay? And I wanna have a little bit of handle on the bar here. Okay, come back and I lengthen this here. And I wanna think about pulling all the way through and bringing my chest. If I keep my chest flexed, it's not gonna light that up as much. Here, and I also, there we go. The other big factor here is I want to think minimally about the hip here in the back leg. So if I go to my right foot, okay, I want to really, really focus on force and pressure going in. And one thing you can do, okay, here, I'm gonna pull this back actually, is try to think, don't grab this with a bar. Grab this with the palm of your hand, like this little part here right around my wrist, like this. And as I stretch, I think come through. Oh, that feels nice. So you're gonna feel this into the back of the knee, all the way up into the glute. One thing that I would recommend here is that you could pair this exercise, okay, the hamstring glider, with Nordics. So I like to do a unilateral movement with a bilateral movement. If Nordics are too hard, you can do like a leg curl, something like that, where you go bilateral and then you use this. So if we're thinking about return to play, somebody has a banged up hamstring, one thing that we can do that I like to think about is they would still do high speed movements like a technical coordination movement as long as it doesn't hurt. We get into single leg squat. Accessories on a leg strength day would be hamstring glider first. If it's okay with the athlete and they don't have a ton of discomfort, we would pair that with some type of Nordic or leg curl. Then over time, let's say they do that for 3 to 4 weeks and they can improve their functional pattern there. The next thing is there, shout out to the absolute quack from Functional Patterns. I shouldn't even be giving him screen time right now. But now, if we take the next step, the next 4 weeks would be doing the hamstring gliders. Okay, and then on an athlete day, I would do something like single leg bounds or double leg bounds into single leg bounds, something that's a high speed movement that targets the hamstring. And then finally, on the phase that we would really be getting them back out onto the field, if they're a football player, a soccer player, lacrosse player, we would start to do things like a Dion with resistance. So they would do like sprints with a 1080 motion or sprints with a weighted sled in the Dion position. And then on the leg strength day, we would go back and we would hit this exercise, okay, the hamstring glider. Get that nice flexibility, target through and bring the chest to the bar. Oh, chest to the bar. And squeeze. Right here, I'm trying to squeeze through that heel. Okay, so that's another big factor too, is that try to have that mind-muscle connection in the hamstring. Again, this isn't the absolute cure-all, but the big factor here is it's targeting the lengthening of the hamstring. It's strengthening the hamstring in a weak position. Third thing, most hamstring injuries occur when there is too much hip flexion and the bar or the placement of the foot is too far forward and they're trying to accelerate. So this can sort of protect the body in that position. Then we pair it with those Nordics, we pair it with high-speed movements, or we plan in those high-speed movements. It's gonna resolve all those hamstring issues. If you guys need help with your programming, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store, because remember, freaks, if you wanna become a champion, you've always gotta cultivate your power. Peace.